Bloody Mary. Just say the name. What comes to mind? For most of us, it's this image of a terrifying, blood-soaked tyrant. For centuries, she's been painted as one of history's great villains. But is that the whole story? Was she really just a monster? Or was she something far more complex, maybe even tragic? Today, we're going to peel back the layers and uncover the real story of England's very first crowned queen.
Just imagine hearing those words, spoken as you're tied to a wooden post, with flames licking at your feet. Those were the defiant last words of a Protestant bishop, Hugh Latimer, right before he and his friend were burned alive. The year was 1555, and the queen who ordered their execution, Mary I. This one single horrific moment, it's really the core of her brutal legacy, a legacy that was built on fire.
And that's the big question, isn't it? How does that happen? The story of Mary Tudor isn't just about cruelty. It's this incredible story of a catastrophic fall from grace and then an equally unbelievable climb back to power. To even begin to understand the queen she became, we have to go back. We have to look at the girl she was and the brutal, unforgiving world that shaped her.
Right, so before all the blood and fire, there was a princess. And not just any princess, she was the jewel of the entire Tudor court. Her life started out like something from a fairy tale, but it would very, very quickly turn into a complete nightmare of betrayal, humiliation, and fear.
I mean, picture this. In her early years, Mary was the center of the universe. As the only surviving child of the larger-than-life King Henry VIII and his Spanish queen, Catherine of Aragon, she was everything. She was smart, she was talented, and she was absolutely adored. Her father called her his pearl of the world and paraded her around the court. She was his hope. She was the heir to the English throne. And then, bam! It all came crashing down. The speed of her downfall is just staggering. In less than 10 years, she goes from treasured princess to an illegitimate nobody. So what happened? Well, it all boiled down to her father's obsession with two things: his new love, Anne Boleyn, and his absolute desperation for a son. To get Anne, he had to divorce Catherine, which kicked off the entire English Reformation. And to make it all legal, his first marriage had to be wiped from the books, meaning Mary was no longer a princess. Just look at this timeline. This isn't one bad event. It's a relentless, systematic campaign of humiliation. She's torn away from her mother, never to see her again. She's publicly branded a bastard. And then the ultimate insult. She's stripped of her title and forced to become a lady-in-waiting to her own baby half-sister, Elizabeth, the daughter of the woman she saw as her mother's rival. Her entire world was just destroyed. And don't for a second think this was just psychological torment. Oh no, this was life-or-death stuff. For 3 years, Mary defied her all-powerful father, clinging to her faith and her mother's honor. The pressure was immense. At one point, one of the king's top counselors threatened to bash her head against a wall until it was as soft as a boiled apple. She genuinely thought she was going to be executed. And finally, broken and terrified for her life, she signed the papers. She gave in, betraying everything she held dear.
After years of being cast aside and living in fear, Mary's moment finally arrived. And the way she grabbed power isn't just a comeback story. It's one of the most brilliant political maneuvers of the entire 16th century. This is where the traumatized victim transforms into a force to be reckoned with.
Okay, so fast forward. It's July 6th, 1553. Mary's devoutly Protestant half-brother, King Edward, is dead. Now, according to their father's will, Mary is the rightful heir. Simple, right? Nope, not even close. The men in power had absolutely no intention of letting a Catholic take the throne and undo their reformation.
So they stage a full-on coup. They literally rewrite the line of succession, cutting Mary out completely, and name her young Protestant cousin, Lady Jane Grey, as the new queen. Then they summon Mary to London, which was almost certainly a trap to imprison her or, worse.
But Mary had been underestimated her whole life, and she was not about to walk into their trap. Instead of heading to London, she rides hard in the opposite direction, to East Anglia. This was a genius move. It was a region where she held land, where people were loyal to her, and where she could hole up in the massive Framlingham Castle to plan her next move.
And she doesn't just hide. No way. She immediately goes on the offensive. She writes to the council in London, basically saying, "I'm the queen, you know it, now swear your loyalty." It was an act of incredible courage. And the amazing thing is, the people responded. Men and nobles started flocking to her side. For them, it wasn't just about religion, it was about the law. She was Henry VIII's true heir.
And the whole coup just collapses in only 9 days. Can you believe it? The council in London saw this massive wave of popular support for Mary, panicked, and switched sides. They dumped Lady Jane Grey and proclaimed Mary as queen. She rode into London as a conquering hero. She hadn't just inherited the throne, she had taken it, an absolutely incredible feat.
So Mary had won. Against all odds, she was Queen of England. But holding on to power and achieving her life's great mission, bringing England back to the Catholic Church, well, that would prove to be a bloody and tragic struggle. This is where the story takes its infamous dark turn.
From the very beginning, her reign was just one crisis after another. She was 37, so she knew she needed a Catholic husband and an heir, fast. But her choice, Philip of Spain, was deeply unpopular and even sparked a huge rebellion. And then, most tragically of all, she endured at least 2 devastating phantom pregnancies, leaving her heartbroken and childless, knowing her Protestant sister Elizabeth would probably take the throne after her. You can just feel this pressure cooker environment building, hardening her resolve.
283. Just let that number sink in for a minute. That's how many Protestant dissenters, men, women, some accounts even say children, were burned at the stake during Mary's 5-year reign. The Marian persecutions were real, they were undeniably brutal, and they all happened on her watch.
Now for us, this is just unimaginable. But to understand why it happened, we have to try to step into their world. In the 16th century, heresy wasn't like a friendly disagreement. It was seen as a spiritual cancer, a rebellion against God himself that, if you let it spread, would bring ruin and chaos to the entire kingdom. And the punishment across Europe, burning, was designed to be terrifying, to completely annihilate the body so it couldn't become a relic. It was horrific, but it was standard practice.
And this is where that all-important context comes in. Look at this chart. Mary's numbers are high, no question, but she was hardly a monster in an age of saints. Her own father Henry VIII executed thousands for treason when they rebelled against his religious changes. And her successor, Elizabeth I, executed hundreds of Catholics too. She just cleverly rebranded their crime from heresy to treason. The entire Tudor era was ruthless. What really made Mary's persecution stick was how public they were and the powerful propaganda that came after.
So if they were all pretty brutal, how did Mary end up with the bloody nickname all to herself? Why did her reputation become so uniquely terrible? Well, the answer, as it so often is, lies in who gets to write the history books.
You know the saying, history is written by the victors. Well, after Mary died and Elizabeth took the throne, the Protestants had definitely won. And in 1563, a writer named John Foxe published what would become one of the most influential books in English history. His Book of Martyrs was an absolute bestseller. It was filled with these graphic, horrifying stories and illustrations of heroic Protestants dying for their faith at the hands of this evil Catholic queen. It was pure propaganda, and it was brilliant. Copies were placed in churches all over England, making sure that for generations, Bloody Mary was the only Mary anyone ever knew.
But here's what Fox's book and centuries of history left out. Beneath all the smoke from the pyres, there were some real, significant achievements. Her government started fixing the economy. She invested heavily in the Navy, actually laying the groundwork for the very fleet that would later defeat the Spanish Armada under Elizabeth. And maybe most importantly, as the first undisputed Queen of England, she legally established that a queen could rule with the exact same power as a king, a vital precedent that her sister Elizabeth would benefit from enormously.
So in the end, you really can't just slap one simple label on Mary I. She was all of these things at once. She was the traumatized daughter shaped by decades of humiliation. She was the resilient, brilliant leader who took back her own throne. She was the devout fanatic, whose faith was both her greatest comfort and the source of her greatest cruelty. Yet she was the architect of her own terrible nickname. And she was a complicated monarch whose very real achievements were deliberately buried by her successors.
And that leaves us right here. Was Bloody Mary just a one-dimensional tyrant? Or was she a tragic queen forged in the fires of trauma, whose unshakable conviction ultimately became her cruelty? Recognizing her suffering and her skill doesn't excuse the burnings, of course not, but understanding the full picture, the personal trauma, the violent age she lived in, and the power of propaganda, it challenges us to look beyond that simple, terrifying nickname and see the complex, broken, and formidable woman behind it all.